We're going to talk to a man that knows so much about Ipswich history. Look, if the council was smart, they'd get onto this bloke and write a book and sponsor it, because he comes up with some great, really interesting yarns about Ipswich. And I've been saying years ago, where Walter Williams lives, just down there on the river, David Greenwood used to tell me there was brothels along there. This is back in the 1910, 1920. Apparently earlier, and on the Bremer River. And he didn't know about it when we said something to Harold the H. Peacock. But he's done some research. Are you there, Harold?
Yeah, I am, Danny. It's cold out here at the banks of the river, I tell you.
What are you trying to find one of those brothels? There's none there, mate. But you've found a story. It goes back to the 1860s around the Bremer River about brothels.
Yeah, that's right. Well, you did ask about brothels in Ipswich in the 1860s, so I went looking. Now, the brothel trade was definitely at its peak in Ipswich before the railway to Brisbane opened in 1876. After that, that's when the steam and the train trade dropped off, and so did the number of convictions for prostitution.
All right. Was there a bloke named Paul getting around then? Go on, keep going.
Well, we'll tell you about it, because I went to the spot on the northern bank of the Bremer River, exactly where you said, hoping that maybe something was left behind, like loose change or whatever. So I swung my metal detector there, but found nothing. However, I also researched the archives and discovered that a brothel did operate just across the bridge from there on the south side of the Bremer, on East Street, near Bremer Street. Right. Now, even back in 1868, which is fairly early in Ipswich history, the building in question was already a dilapidated house. And 1868 was when 3 children, aged 2, 4 and 8 years old, were found by police to be living there under the care of an unrelated woman of bad character. Now, the children were taken to the industrial school in Brisbane, and that's when the story of 4 generations connected to this Ipswich brothel begins. And a warning, Danny, some of the details may be disturbing.
Ooh,
anyway,
we love that.
There's a warning. Have you got your mask on? There's a warning.
Anyway, the father of the children was Samuel Thorpe, who had arrived in Ipswich as a convict in 1841. He deserted them some years before. Their mother was Jane Duff, who was another convict and was working at the house as a prostitute.
She got married and got up the duff.
No, well, in fact, she'd been killed in the disturbance just 2 weeks before. Yeah, sorry about that. But the thing is, no one was willing to give evidence, and so no charges were ever laid.
Wow.
Now, Jane's death ended her 15-year marriage to Samuel, who had been convicted a number of times for violently assaulting her. At one stage, it was even reported that he'd used an axe to decapitate her in Dalby, but that proved to be false. Now,
I'm glad about that.
Yeah. She did come to a grisly end. But the thing is, the youngest child who was left at the brothel was 2-year-old Isabella Thorpe. Now, she got married when she was 30 but never had any children. The middle child was 4-year-old Fred Thorpe. 20 years later, he died from tuberculosis at the Woogaroo Mental Asylum at Waco. But the oldest child was 8-year-old Frank Thorpe.
Yes.
Now, he had 6 children and married very well because his wife's relatives included Lord Blaney. Wow. Now, he was the Anglo-Irish peer who fought with distinction in the Napoleonic Wars. And Frank's in-laws, get this, they were really big into the sewage trade because they had the sanitary contracts for Bundaberg, Maryborough, Gympie, Townsville and elsewhere.
Wow.
Anyway, Frank passed away in Rockhampton in 1942, aged 43, but not before seeing the tragic life unfold of his daughter, Rebecca Thorpe. Now, in 1918, Rebecca married a jockey. 8 years later, Rebecca fired a revolver at him, but hit someone else. Now, he was too small, I think.
This is true.
Yeah, this is absolutely true. Now, it was Rebecca who was hospitalised and a husband who was convicted of assault. Anyway, Rebecca was 45 in 1939 when she had an argument with her daughter and then suicided by drinking cleaning fluid. She died in her daughter's arms in Brisbane's West End. Now, the very next year, the daughter, Mickey, married a mechanic who was the son of a First World War veteran who'd been wounded in Belgium with 73 pieces of shrapnel, some of which remained in him for the rest of his life. Anyway, her husband passed away in 1958, and that's when Mickey, she's the 4th generation from that dilapidated brothel in Ipswich that you asked about, she disappeared from the records. So, Danny, your question about wanting to find and go to some Ipswich brothels led to one family and 4, I think, really interesting but really tragic stories.
And tell me, is that brothel still there, like at the house?
No, it's been built on because it's down the lower end of East Street, near Bremer Street, right on the river. So no, it's just sort of roadways and roundabouts and stuff there now.
Mate, Pete, you got to admit, he's a brilliant storyteller.
Absolutely,
He goes rolls from one, and he's actually telling a true story. Mate, honestly, Ipswich City Council, get this man write a book. Anyhow, if anyone was smart, they'd get you on air other places. But, mate, really good stuff. And you got the historyouthere.com, and this will be downloaded by tomorrow if you want to read the story again. Is that right?
Yeah, that's right. Historyouthere.com. And there's some photos of some of the family members too, of the convicts and people who lived in the brothels there in Ipswich. All thanks to your question, Danny.
That doesn't mean I'm into brothels, all right? But there you go. Well, good on you. That was historyouthere.com. Harold the H. Peacock. Does anyone ever come up to you and talk to you like that?
Yes, I do. In fact, we had a zombie story the other week. Now, we got Jacob, one of our listeners. He's actually planning a trip up to Ipswich to look for zombies. So, hello, Jake.
Hello,
mate, you know why I love you? You're weird and you bring the weirdos to the program. That was Harold the H. Peacock on West Bremer Radio.